Hi, everyone. I'm here with Amy. Amy has got so much experience. I am debating about which part of her biography and life story I should read. There's just so much to it. I'm really excited to dive in. I'm just going to say that Amy is an award winning registered dietitian nutritionist. She's a farmer's daughter speaker, published author, founder, and president of Farmers Daughters Consulting, which is a privately held agriculture, food, and culinary communications firm. So I just saw something that intrigued me in your biography online, and that was you have published peer reviewed articles on nutrition. And I just wanted to know what that was about and what was perhaps the article you are most proud of.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, I started my career first in public relations, and this was back in the late 90s. And I wasn't comfortable with the research we were using on behalf of our clients who were part of the food industry. And my cynicism about the research led me to get a job in clinical research. And so it was a privately held company in Massachusetts owned by a cardiologist. And part of our responsibility was designing the studies, getting funding, designing the studies, recruiting study participants, leading them through protocols anywhere between 12 weeks to 9 months, and then getting published. So that's when my peer reviewed publications started on different dietary interventions that would reduce risk of heart disease. Your question about what am I most proud of, that's work that I did when I was with the Culinary Institute of America. And we partnered with the University of California, Davis and their sensory science department to do research to see if consumers would accept ground beef that was blended with mushrooms. And this research was done because we were working with a group of large volume food service operators, men and women who work for the biggest restaurant chains in this country. And they were getting intense pressure about food cost. And we Americans love burgers. The average American eats 3 burgers each week. And this is at a time when the price of beef, chicken, other animal-based protein sources were going through the roof for a number of reasons. And we said, well, what if this was a strategy for reducing food cost by cutting the beef with mushroom while also changing the nutrition profile and also having a little bit of a sustainability story to tell? And I got 2 papers out of that research that I did with Dr. Jean-Xavier Guinard at UC Davis. And it's changed how the industry is now thinking about blending animal protein with plant-based sources that what we found in the mushroom study is people liked the product better because it had better aromas, it was moister, it had a different mouthfeel. So, yeah.
That's awesome. They liked it more.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm wondering, I think it's Beyond Meat or one of the meatless meats. I wonder, how indirect or directly related to that paper you published about mushrooms is. It seems like you kind of were at more of the front wave when we were
Yeah.
kind of getting away from all this
We,
stuff. It seems
we
like
were
relevant in my own life. Yeah.
we weren't going for plant-based. We were trying to give people what they wanted. The end consumer wanted a delicious hamburger, and the food service operator wanted a food cost that would make their operations financially sustainable. And it's really growing. There are food service companies, restaurants all across the country that do this today. There's a James Beard Foundation blended burger project that happens every year. So it's really growing. And the National Restaurant Association released their What's Hot trend forecast for 2020. Blended protein is one of the top 10 trends. So we did this research back in 2012, and it's just slowly growing over time. And it's been really encouraging that we can provide an option for people who want to enjoy beef or pork or turkey or whatever, but they want more flavor, they want juiciness, they feel a little better about it, and there's nothing wrong with eating beef, and there's no sustainability issues with beef. It's part of an integrated system of plant and animal agriculture that has lots of benefits. But this study.
Beautiful. How much percent of a burger can be mushroom based without, or that people really enjoy and will just pick it because it smells good and tastes good and makes their mouth water and taste good? How, like, yeah, what's the percentage?
So we had people in the study between the ages of 18 and 65, and they were screened to make sure that they would eat mushrooms, that they didn't have an allergy or an intolerance. But we did have a number of people who were self-described meat and potatoes. They were mostly men who their preconception was, I'm not going to like this. And we tested a 50% blend and 80% mushroom, 20% beef. And
Wow.
people who were the meat and potatoes people like the 50-50 blend. The younger millennials, especially younger millennial females, preferred the 80-20 blend with lots of mushroom, just a little bit of beef.
Wow, that's way more than I would have expected. I was thinking, I thought in my head, I was asking that question, like, should I phrase it? I think I left out a number. In my head, I was like, is it 50% mushroom? I wanted to say like 15 or 10% as if that would be a lot, but it was 50%. Oh my, and 80%.
Yeah. But one of the things that we found is that the perception is that the mushrooms were going to help with food costs. Well, as beef prices came down, mushroom prices, there's been increasing demand. So the price of mushrooms compared to beef are kind of equal now, depends on the type of mushroom. And so it wasn't really a food cost benefit. So the companies that are doing this today, Jared, tend to blend 20 to 30% of the meat is replaced with mushroom.
Got you. Interesting how everything works. Okay, so you were at the Culinary Institute of America. When I read your website, I saw CIA. I was like, what?
Yeah, it's the other CIA. We'd give you the recipe, but then we'd have to kill you.
Yeah. So you were there for 20 years.
Just seven.
Just seven.
Yep.
And before that, or after that, it must have been after, you gave a speech topic for the 53rd Lana Frances Cooper Memorial Lecture, and it was for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Food. What was your topic about?
It's the biggest honor I've received in my career, and you get nominated for this. It's a competitive process. One member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics gets this honor each year. The Academy has over 75,000 members, so there's a lot of us dietitians out there who are Academy members. And when you get the honor, you get notified 15 months in advance of when you have to give the speech, and you can talk about whatever you want.
Wow.
It seems awesome, but it's also quite torturous. I spent about 6 months, I travel a lot, and I spent my time on airplanes jotting down ideas. And finally, one of my mentors said to me, stop making yourself crazy. Talk about what you know best, your success in your career path. So my speech was titled Success in Dietetics, Inspired by Farmers, Flavor, and Fun.
Oh my gosh. Holy crap. You just that's the podcast episode. All right. We're just going to talk about that the rest of the podcast episode. What was it? Flavor, a farmer's daughter, flavor.
So Success in Dietetics, Inspired by Farmers, Flavor, and Fun.
So how are you defining success in dietetics? Obviously, you're standing up on a stage giving a speech in front of 70,000 odd of your peers, which is obviously success. But what led you up to that point? What was that career arc?
So it took me a long time to figure out what success means to me. And for a long time, early in my career, I wasn't making a lot of money. I was scrapping along, living in a horrible apartment outside of San Francisco when the first tech boom happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then I was down in LA, and everybody was living this fast, hard life, and it was keeping up with the Joneses. And so I was thinking success was making another dollar or another 10,000 or 20,000. And when I started my own business, Farmer's Daughter Consulting, what I realized was success is being happy. So I talked about the various chapters in my career and why I made decisions, why I often didn't make the decision that my mom or my mentors recommended. I followed what I wanted for me, being a little selfish. But what I realized was it was me trying to find happiness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like, what
Um,
are some unconventional choices? I think the word unconventional is appropriate. Like your mom is recommending you.
Well, I'll tell you, in dietetics, most people say that when you finish your internship and you can sit and take the exam to get your credentials, that your first job should be in clinical dietetics, that you should work in a hospital or clinic, and that you need at least a year of that before you go out and practice anywhere else. And I have type 1 diabetes. And when I was doing my internship, I had to do staff relief for 6 weeks in a kidney transplant ward of the hospital. And it was really depressing because most of the people getting the kidney transplants were people with poorly managed diabetes, some getting their fourth or fifth kidney transplant.
Mm.
And I went home every night and cried myself to sleep during that time. And I said, I can't do this. I can't stand over someone's hospital bed or sit across from them in a clinic telling them things that maybe would have been helpful 20, 30 years ago. I know there are some people I could help right now, but it just didn't seem like the right fit for me
Yeah.
professionally or emotionally. So I went straight into grad school. And that was, my undergraduate advisor, my internship preceptors all said, you can't do that. You can't go straight to grad school. You don't even know what you want to do yet. And I'm like, well, I know I want to not do clinical. So I went to grad school.
Research.
Well, it was actually marketing and communications.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so for marketing and communications, because this is starting to make sense, because part of your Farmer's Daughters consulting right now is messaging, nutritional messaging. Can you speak about that? Because there's a lot of nutritional messaging. I just had a lady on the other day, and she was talking about snack wells. And I asked her about snack wells because I wasn't sure. And she said that this was one of her first foods that she started binging on back in the day because they were advertised and marketed as fat free, right? This is back in the early 90s and so forth. Yeah, okay. And then, but they didn't say they got loads of sugar in them. And so it seems like there's a lot of problems with nutritional marketing these days. I'm sure it's done to sell. I get it. Maybe it makes money. What are your thoughts on, maybe this is a too broad a question and you can rephrase the question to be more useful, but how do you do nutritional marketing and messaging the right way?
So when I started my business, a lot of the work that I did on behalf of clients was helping clients stay out of trouble with federal entities that oversee nutrition marketing and claims. And that's the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Trade Commission, and USDA when it comes to meat and poultry, or the US Department of Agriculture. And so I did a lot of kind of policing, reading copy, or helping write copy, whether it was for public relations or advertising campaigns. And what was happening is people were paying less attention to that kind of language and were more motivated with the agriculture, sustainability, food processing messaging. So I've switched much more into that area of communications. And it has a lot more meaning for me because as a farmer's daughter, I know that there are unintended consequences and business reasons why farmers and ranchers make the decisions they do. And so today, what I'm doing is being a voice of science, evidence, research, and technology on the side of farmers. Less than 2% of the US population grows the food for the rest of us. And we as a society have been putting more and more pressure, the demands that we've been making, thinking that this is good for communities, good for sustainability, good for the farm economy. And a lot of what consumers are pushing for is not good for any of those things. So most of my work today in the communication side is on what's going on in modern agriculture and why these choices are made. And then what leads to deliciousness, because talking about nutrition, people go, oh, that sounds like deprivation. But if you talk about flavor and deliciousness, and I can do this by promoting foods and ingredients that are inherently healthful, but how do you cook them, prepare them, present them in ways that people go, I want to eat more of that. That was so good.
That's good. Yeah. What did you mean unintended consequences? I feel maybe this is something else too, but I feel like there's a lot of pressure and that farmers are marginalized. And that's something that you speak about and speak towards. You said earlier there were unintended consequences. I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
Well, maybe that wasn't the right choice of words. Um, so people are very concerned about the impact that farmers and ranchers are having on the environment today.
Such as methane and stuff like that, or okay,
Right,
sure.
right. And we're kind of putting pressure on farmers and ranchers to change how they're doing business, change how they're farming, how they're raising animals. And some of the unintended consequences aren't for the farmer, but are for us as a society. That if we're putting pressure, well, let me give you one example. I can't tell you who the client is, but they came to me and they said, our company is thinking about moving to a non-GMO product. And it was a product with three ingredients: wheat, sea salt, and soybean oil. And the soybean oil was the only genetically modified ingredient. Most of soybeans grown in this country, about 95%, are a genetically modified variety. The unintended consequence of their marketing team, based on consumer insights, of them going to a non-genetically modified soybean oil so they could say their product was non-GMO, is that the two farmers growing the soybeans for the soybean oil for that product had to plant more land and had to till it more often, which meant more fossil fuels are being burned to till the land to grow more acres and to till the land to control weeds. The genetically modified version, the farmer spends less time in his or her tractor tending to that crop.
Yeah,
So there's an unintended consequence, and people feel like their pressure, and people in marketing often feel like we have to go with what our consumer is demanding, and we feel good about this. We're doing such good things for our environment, when oftentimes the opposite is happening.
interesting. So this is coming down to, well, one of the things it's coming down to is like the costs and there's some discussion, although from what I know that my friend, my best friend Britt, he always does research, and so I'm influenced a lot by him and how he's looking. And he's a total Democrat, and he's like science based and everything, and he's calling out Democrats these days, saying, "Hey guys, like the science says that genetically modified foods are fine. There's not really any harm, and so that if your values are to protect the environment, you know it's a good decision." But I do recognize, and that's kind of my belief as well, but I do recognize that there's maybe some, it's out there. The consumer sentiment, yeah. The consumer sentiment is GMO's bad, basically.
Yeah, and it's been led by an activist movement that was very organized, and the companies producing the genetically modified seeds were thinking they needed to talk to their customer, the farmer, and they kind of missed out on a whole chapter of consumer conversations. And the activists grabbed attention, and they did so in a way that created fear and doubt. And we're hardwired to pay much more attention to something that induces fear and doubt than something that creates a sense of ease. This is back in the days when you could be chased by a saber-toothed tiger, right? Warning, there's something coming to kill you. And you're like, that's my focus. Everything I do has to be avoid that something that's going to kill me. And we're still hardwired that way. We have an emotional response to negative fear inducing information. And the activists knew that, and they did their job well. But the unfortunate consequence is that our society is now making demands of our food system that are not in the best interest of the few people growing and producing our food, that are not in the best interest of keeping an affordable food supply. There's still a lot of Americans who are hungry and are food insecure, and not in the best interest of protecting the environment.
So your role in this is, I could see so many different parties involved, and I guess you're probably a bunch of things, education, and so forth. But your consulting firm, does that, like for this example that you brought up above with your client who had 3 products, how did you help them? Did you help them educate their consumers, or what's your role in this whole thing, and how do you help people?
There was a member of the product development team that wanted a white paper on the facts about genetic modification just, what are the crops that are genetically modified? What does the research say about safety? What are consumer sentiments on this issue? And then that gentleman took it to the larger marketing team involved in that product, and they made the decision that they did want to go non-GMO because their consumer insight showed people felt better about buying their product if it had the non-GMO claim on it. And they've gone gangbusters with their advertising and marketing. So.
So there's a discrepancy about the research and consumer sentiment one.
Yeah. And that's true in a lot of our food system today, that people in marketing hold a lot of power, whether that's in a restaurant chain or a consumer packaged goods company. And decisions are made that will get a consumer to spend his or her hard-earned money on your product, your restaurant, your new packaged whatever. And that's unfortunate, because the more that marketing focuses light on something like non-GMO, the more people feel like that's the best, and it drives me crazy when products that don't have a genetically modified counterpart, like watermelon, there's watermelon juice on the market that's non-GMO. Well, who cares? There is no GMO watermelon. So why are you saying that? And it's because the more claims that are on a product, the better we as consumers feel about it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And marketers know that. So, yeah.
Interesting. So there's not even so they're saying it's non-GMO, but there is no GMO watermelon.
Right.
I see. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. It's like in the old days, people used to say things like, this is a cholesterol-free peanut butter. Well, hey, guess what? There's no cholesterol in any plant-based food, so who cares?
Yeah. It's such a, books like Food Politics, and it's such a convoluted system. It's politics. It's just messy. What's your mission at Farmers and Daughters Services?
You know what? I don't have a mission. I have a tagline, and it's the same thing I used for my Lena Francis Cooper Memorial Lecture. Farmer's Daughter Consulting, inspired by farmers, flavor, and fun. So, I pay respect to the men and women who work so hard and take on so much risk to produce the food for the rest of us. I'm blessed that I can, go to the grocery store and buy what I want without having to worry about Mother Nature or global markets or whatnot. And I have 3 brothers who farm today on our family farm in North Dakota. I care deeply about their success and the next generation's option to be able to join the farming operation. Inspired by Flavor is about enjoying food. I want people to enjoy healthful diets, but taste is still the number one factor of why we choose the foods and beverages we do. So I want to help people find ways to more flavorful, more delicious food. And then fun, that's just me. I mean, I like to laugh. I like to joke around. I like to have fun.
You've written a bunch of books. One of them is the Healthy Heart Cookbook, and you're also talking about flavor. What are some healthy heart foods that are flavorful that you'd recommend and get excited about talking about, that farmers grow and, that are good for the environment and all that? What are some of those foods?
Yeah, well, one of them that I'm super passionate about, as somebody who lives here in Northern California, is California extra virgin olive oil. So olive oil is essentially fresh fruit juice. Olives are a fruit, and when they get pressed, you get this beautiful oil. And here in California, we have a system for certifying if it truly is extra virgin, which means almost free of defects, that there's such a low level of them that you get this beautiful flavors and aromas. And I love teaching people about, okay, buy it, cook with it. There's BS out there about you can't heat extra virgin olive oil. Yes, you can. You just don't want it to be at super high heat for a long period of time. But if you enjoy broccoli, for example, that's sauteed in extra virgin olive oil with a little bit of garlic, my God, then that's how you should cook and eat your broccoli. And so I
love it. I love my parents. They they both retired recently in the
Good
last
for
year. So
them.
I think they started cultivating and growing their olive tree in their backyard. Yeah. And they actually recently drove down from Sacramento down to, it's a little bit south of Sacramento. Maybe it's in Fresno somewhere, but it's a community-based olive press. So I think they press it once a week, and you bring in 10 pounds of olives or something, and then they take a proportion of it and they give you back the olive juice from your olives. And yeah, they came back with like 5 or 6 bottles of olive oil. And it was interesting. Like, it was a little bit different. It was a little lemony. I don't know, it was a little bit different flavor.
Oh,
It was still olive oil, but just like, you got all these different strands, and it's not all one crop. And
yeah.
it was really good. And we're a huge fan of olive oil. It's so healthy. It's got those good fats. What do they call them?
Yeah, the unsaturated fat.
Yeah, the
Or
unsaturated fats.
monounsaturated. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And there's
Yeah.
also the phenols. One thing, that people who do sensory evaluation of olive oil, they talk about a 1 cough, 2 cough, or 3 cough oil. And that means if you take just olive oil, put it in your mouth, bring in air, swirl it around your palate, and then swallow it. If you don't cough at all, there's very low levels of the beneficial phenols. If you cough once, there's some phenols. If you're coughing 3 times, that is a powerhouse oil with so many protective phenolic compounds that are beneficial for our brains, for our hearts. So
This is so random. A coughing test? This is so
this
funny.
is
Like,
legitimate. Yeah.
that's so like, yeah, that's funny. Phenols, the more of them, they somehow make it interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Awesome. I love it. So you also write about, seems like a lot of this stuff is educating people, which is amazing job. You're writing books. You also write a monthly column in the Produce Business Journal. What are you writing about in your books and on this journal?
So, Produce Business is a magazine for people who work in produce departments of supermarkets around the country, for people who are in the produce industry, growing, packing, shipping, marketing fresh produce. And then they have a small food service audience as well. And so, my column each month focuses on issues related to produce and use of produce in the food service industry. So, sometimes I'm doing interviews with leading thought leaders. Sometimes I'm talking about chefs and flavor development strategies they're using. Sometimes I'm making fun of kale. I hate
What's
kale.
wrong with kale?
And it's a long story of why I hate kale. But in my speeches, I talk about being a kale hater. I have people who now send me gifts, kale aprons, kale shopping bags. I have a kale spoon in front of me. It's just kale socks. I have 6 pairs of kale socks that say "Kale me now" with kale leaves on them. And anyway, that's a whole other story for another day. But yeah, so it's all about, how do we get food service operators to use more produce? How do we get people selling produce to have the right conversations with people who make buying decisions for major restaurant chains? And produce in food service is different from produce in retail. You and I, as a shopper in a supermarket, we go in and we want to pick the most beautiful apple or pomegranate or bell pepper. People in produce want it to have the best possible flavor. They don't care what it looks like because it's going to get chopped up and prepped and put into something. So it's a totally different conversation about what are the specifications that a consumer wants versus a food service operator.
Interesting. How many books have you written?
Not that many. I did the
Okay.
Healthy Heart Cookbook for Dummies back in the late 90s.
Oh, you were an editor of a few or something like that.
Yeah. When
Got
I
you.
worked for Dole Food Company, I was the editor of our kids cookbook called the Dole 5-A-Day Kids Cookbook. When I worked for the Culinary Institute of America, I was an editor on a textbook on healthful cooking techniques. So that's used by culinary students all over the U.S.
I see. What do you just kind of before we wrap up too? Everyone always is super curious about what the interviewee, everyone always wants to know, like, oh, you're a health expert. What do you eat in your daily life? So, yeah, what do you tend to eat?
Yeah, it varies. one of the things, okay, so when I met my husband, he was he was like, I'm just a simple meat and potatoes guy, but he grew up in Louisiana. So he had a certain style of eating that he was used to. And I was like, wow, well, I'm a dietitian and I'm going to introduce a few more fruits and vegetables to your life. So as a caring wife and a concerned dietitian, I make for both of us each morning fruit smoothies. And this is like so geeky, but okay, we have citrus trees in our backyard. And right now we have a crazy abundance of Mineola tangelos, navel oranges, and Mexican seedless limes.
Mm.
And I am fair skinned, but I like spending time in the sun. And there was research published by the University of Arizona about 10 years ago showing that there's a natural compound in the peel of citrus fruit that protects the fruit from damage from the sun and can also be protective for us for skin damage from sun exposure. So I love to figure out ways to consume citrus peel, whether it's zested into, like a quick red batter or put into rice, like a lemon rice to serve with an Indian dish or whatever. Okay, so I put the peel and the whole orange in. I put in apples.
You
That's
put the peel with the whole orange. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Interesting.
I just trim off the end bits, where you have that stem attachment. And then it's frozen berries, like the Costco mixed bag of berries. We also have a pomegranate tree, so when they're big enough that I can actually get some, arrows out of it, I'll put those in. And we start our day, and it's a lot. It's 4 to 5 servings of fruit to start the day. So okay, he's set for the day. I'm set for the day. That's one of my geeky dietitian things. I love cooking. I love Mediterranean cuisine, mostly Italian cuisine. I have a dear friend who's an Indian chef. He grew up in India and then had the first Michelin-starred Indian restaurant in the U.S. in New York City. He taught me many, many techniques of Indian cooking. What else? I could go on and on. Like
sure.
My geek sweet spot, Jared. So
yeah, no, I felt that passion. What just curious, do you eat what else do you eat consistently? Not like, but what else do you eat? I don't know, for lunch or for dinner? I mean, I think for dinner I'm tapping into a sense that it's maybe so diverse. But what are your like top 5 foods you eat most consistently?
Okay, every single day I have coffee. I mean, that's a given no matter where I am in the world, right? I love full-fat Greek yogurt with no flavorings, no sweeteners. I love that. I eat lots of walnuts. I stir them into the full-fat Greek yogurt. What do I like? Lunch today was a homemade Italian meatball soup with lots of beans in it and vegetables and whatnot. What else do I eat consistently? Oh my God, I love
olive oil.
Yeah. So one of my lunches at least once a week is chopped frozen spinach, fresh garlic that's minced, sauteed in olive oil with red pepper flakes, and then I add in eggs and a little bit of cheese. Sometimes it's sharp white cheddar, sometimes it's Parmesan, and I have that with whole grain toast. Like, I love that meal. So anyway.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to time for lunch. All right, bye. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So where can people contact you?
Oh, so my website is farmersdaughterconsulting.com. And on social media, so that's LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, I'm at Amy Myrdal, Myrdal Miller. That's my boring handle on all 3 channels. Yeah, and my contact information's on my website. So go check it out, read a blog or 2, and reach out if you need to via the website.
That's Farmer's Daughters Consulting.
Farmer's Daughter Consulting.
Farmer's Daughter Consulting.
Yep.
Got you. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to just to hear about the rest of your journey and so forth.
My pleasure, Jared. Thanks for the opportunity to have this very fun conversation.